British Columbia Institute of Technology acknowledges that our campuses are located on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh.
Good morning. My name is Ryan Bowles, and these are your news updates to 11 o'clock. Premier David Eby is in Surrey today, where he is revealing his party's election platform. The NDP have already unveiled certain aspects of their platform, including an annual tax cut of $1,000 for families starting in 2025. The BC Greens showed off their platform at a news conference on Tuesday, while John Rustad and the BC Conservatives are yet to unveil their full platform. The midway point of this election campaign is fast approaching, with Election Day being October 19th, and advanced voting will begin October 10th. Food delivery service DoorDash will be increasing fees in BC over new government rules that it pays its drivers a fair wage. Starting this month, DoorDash will be charging a 99-cent fee for restaurant deliveries and up to $3 for all other delivery orders. DoorDash says the new wage of $20.88 is 20% higher than the provincial minimum. The service claims the new regulations are significantly increasing their operating cost. New health concerns are being raised over the federal government's decision not to provide Novavax's COVID-19 vaccine this year. The government will only provide reformulated Pfizer and Moderna COVID vaccines. Karen Rebo of the Canadian Press explains the concerns of those who are immunocompromised.
The Public Health Agency of Canada says it won't buy Novavax's protein-based vaccine because the manufacturer requires a minimum order that far exceeds last year's uptake. But some people say they are immunocompromised and had adverse reactions to the mRNA vaccines, and so they need an alternative. Don Bowdish, an immunologist at Hamilton's McMaster University, says extensive research shows that mRNA vaccines are safe for the vast majority of people who have autoimmune diseases. But she adds it's important to offer a vaccine that they're comfortable taking. And she notes not everyone can afford the cost or time to travel to the U.S. for the protein-based shot. Karen Rebo, the Canadian Press.
A military pharmacist has been fined $10,000 after stealing pills from a BC military base to feed his addictions. Captain Fatim Harjrazaj pled guilty to conduct to the prejudice of good order and discipline for the theft of over 500 amphetamine pills from the base pharmacy in Esquimalt. In his guilty plea, Harjrazaj says he was motivated by a worsening addiction and a mental health crisis. Military Judge Julie Deschênes said Harjrazaj showed remorse for his actions. Closing arguments will begin today in the sexual assault trial of Headley frontman Jacob Hogard. The Canadian Press's Karen Rebo has more on what's expected from today's trial.
Both Hogard and his accuser took the stand over the nearly 2-week trial in Haileybury, Ontario. They've offered starkly different accounts of a June 2016 encounter in nearby Kirkland Lake. The Crown and defense agree that a sexual encounter took place in the Headley Singers hotel room following the band's concert and a bonfire after party. But prosecutors are seeking to prove it was not consensual. The complainant says Hogard raped, choked, and hit her, while Hogard says they flirted all night and then had a consensual one-night stand. The defense is expected to conclude its case this morning before closing statements begin. Karen Rebo, the Canadian Press.
Canada Post has announced 2 new stamps honoring Canadian music television. The National Postal Service says the stamps will feature Much Music and Music Plus for their contribution to Canadian music. The stations were responsible for connecting Canadian viewers with their favorite artists and provided a platform for Canadian musicians. Both stations hosted many popular programs, with the most notable being Much Music's Countdown and Video on Trial. Canada Post will be unveiling the stamps next Thursday in separate ceremonies in Toronto and Montreal. Amazon Prime subscribers are set to get an inside look at last season's Stanley Cup final. Face Off Inside the NHL will be a 6-part series that will include the Edmonton Oilers' failed bid for the Stanley Cup. Oilers forward Zach Hyman says the series provides a glimpse into the life of NHL hockey.
In the moment, fans don't really have access to how does this guy react in between periods, or how does this guy react after a game, or what does the captain say in the locker room after a hard loss or after a win.
For your weather, today we'll see a mix of sun and clouds with a high of 16 and a low of 9 tonight. The rain rolls in this evening and will continue into Friday, where we expect a high of 13. These were your news updates to 11 o'clock. My name is Ryan Bowles, and you're listening to BCIT's The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow. This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
What do you collect?
I collect shoes,
K-pop albums,
Rocks and crystals.
Pokemon cards,
money,
sports trading cards,
photo cards.
I collect jewelry from different countries I visited and from thrift stores.
Welcome back to Agree to Disagree.
This is the Cheeky Collector's Guide. So, Lauren, do you collect anything?
I don't collect anything at the moment, but I used to collect those little Disney plushies. I think they were called Tsum Tsums. I used to have so many of them. Unfortunately, my parents gave them away. I think I grew out of them according to them, but how about you, Tammy?
Well, I have always been a Sanrio girly. I had a very modest collection of mostly Hello Kitty items when I was a kid. Obviously your parents aren't buying you toys every day.
Yeah.
But now that I'm older, I have access to adult money, I've added a couple things to that collection.
Yeah, absolutely. And collecting is such a big thing right now, and it has been for quite some time. You can collect Funko Pops, vintage art, vinyls, there's a whole range of things to collect. It's an endless world of collecting.
Yeah, and there's some real value that can be generated from these collections, especially if you manage to get your hands on something that was maybe owned by a celebrity or something that was limited edition or even first edition. There's some real big money in these collections.
Totally.
Aw, new Charizard card. Cool.
New Gym Challenge game cards.
Can G.I. Joe stop the Crimson Guard? Find out in Marvel Comics.
And that was from the Pokemon Gym Challenge card set commercial from 1999 and the G.I. Joe 1985 Marvel Comics commercial.
There are different collectors out there. People who make art, people who sell them, people who just admire them for themselves. I mean, what is it? Profit, for passion, or both?
You know what? I met a guy the other day who just paints on Pokemon cards.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, you can find him on Instagram. He goes by Sukoko Studio. He takes Pokemon cards, and you know how they just have a little rectangle of art where you can see the Pokemon?
Yeah.
He takes that and he basically expands the painting to fill the entire card. This is how he puts it.
Oh, I like that one. That one's sweet.
That's adorable.
Yeah, these later ones definitely goes back to my childhood where I would also stare at my Pokemon cards and just imagine what that world looked like. And I paint on everything. I try to paint on all over my sketchbooks. I just thought, what if I, just expanded the world?
Well, I'm sure that there are many out there that would probably not even think to paint over a Pokemon card.
Yeah, Sue's not painting on a first edition Charizard or anything. Most of the cards he paints on are not worth more than a couple dimes probably. But it doesn't even matter to him anyway because the value of Pokemon cards to him isn't the monetary value but the Pokemon card itself. In fact, to him, a roughed up Pokemon card is more valuable than a mint condition one because a roughed up one has all the stories and the memories attached to it.
Those ones tell more of a story, especially even if they are a little bit damaged, because for me, I want to be able to feel how do I transform it? Do I make it seem as if, the card itself was attacked by a Pokemon? How do I, incorporate that? I want to do more of that.
He also told me about the role of Pokemon in his childhood and why it means so much to him even today.
We were immigrants, so we didn't have a lot of money, so my parents got me 2 packs of Pokemon cards for my birthday. And I remember being a little kid and being they're my pets, so I'd lay them all out and then feed them goldfish crackers. And it's when I talk to people about the Pokemon cards, everybody has stories like that. They all have little things they would, especially because in your childhood, people, they would take their cards with them wherever in the rain and in puddles, and now they're able to kind of like relive that.
And I'm sure that there are many people like Sue out there, but maybe not with Pokemon cards. Well, what about comic books? I met this artist a little while back who creates collages out of vintage comic books. He's a collector and an artist.
Oh, really?
Just like Sue. One thing I'm also sure of, though, is that there are a handful of people who would never even consider making art out of their collections. It's a completely different mindset.
Yeah, definitely.
Just like Paul. I met a guy named Paul who works at a collector store and is an avid comic book collector. He told me that he would never even consider touching his comic books other than admiring them and reading them. To make art, well, he said that's a completely different ballpark.
That's not something I would do, not something I would recommend. To me, that's kind of like debasing the comic. Like, I'm a collector that likes to have his collection complete, like 100%, not with pieces missing and things out of it, right? If I see a comic like that, I wouldn't buy it because it's not for me.
Paul also mentioned that he values the profit he makes from selling his comic books.
Like, okay, this is what I used to do when I was younger. I would buy certain books and I would sell certain books, and then nowadays I look back and what I did back then, and I realized that those were mistakes, because some of the books I sold for like a couple thousand back then are now worth like 40, 50,000. So I'm sitting there going, wow, I sold a book for 2,000 that now is worth over 50,000. I go, and I had a bunch of them. I could retire off of that stuff. I had like 20 copies like that I did, thinking, wow, I made a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there. This is fantastic. Not real.
Paul and Sue are two very different collectors. I mean, one likes to make art and the other one likes to collect and make profit off of his comic books. For me personally, I wouldn't know what I want to do. I mean, I'm not an artist and I'm not a salesman either, so I'm not too sure how I would go about it. For me, when I was younger, whenever I had a collection of something, I wouldn't want anyone to touch it. I would present it really neatly in my room and just kind of admire it from a distance and then tell people to admire it from even a further distance.
For me personally, I can't justify spending money on something unless I can use it. So if I collect something, like I collect Sanrio things, if I get like a Hello Kitty keychain, I'll put it on my backpack because then I'll actively be using it and I'm actively enjoying it rather than just having it on a shelf somewhere.
And with a collection, at least for me, I wanted to complete it. And so that's what I asked Paul. I asked him what would he do if he collected all the comic books.
I don't think that's ever going to happen because, like you said, not just with the sheer amount of books out there, but just the sheer dollar volume. There's so much stuff out there I want that I can never afford, right? Because there's books out there that's worth millions of dollars, worth more than a house. I'm never going to be able to afford that, right? So
Sue and Paul are different types of collectors, and it's because they have different values. I think Sue as a person values the artistry and the nostalgia, whereas what do you think Paul values more?
I think he values having the pristine collection but also making money off of it. Like he said, he would choose to sell certain comic books and keep others. So I think definitely a part of it is making a profit off of them. I mean, he is a manager at a collection store.
I guess they just represent the different types of collectors there are out there, huh? Because for me, myself, I think I relate to Sue more. I'm definitely not planning to sell my collection, but it's more of a nostalgia and having this that means a lot to me rather than oh, I'm probably going to sell this and make more money later.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not an artistic person when it comes to painting or drawing, but if it's a collection that I'm really, really passionate about, I would never consider selling kind of those collectibles. If I came across something that was worth a lot and it didn't mean too much to me, I definitely consider seeing how much money it's worth and maybe giving it to somebody who actually wants it and values it for their own collection.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a bonus. if I were to pass away, I mean, I will eventually, but when I do, it'd be a nice bonus if like the stuff that I own actually has some value, and then that would benefit like your loved ones, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I do think they share one commonality though.
Yeah, what is that?
They both regret getting rid of the stuff they had as a kid.
Right.
But like maybe for different reasons. Like Stu wants to be able to paint on his old cards, and Paul, you know, he's thinking about how much his old stuff would be worth today.
Yeah.
But I think like we all relate to that. Like, you know, you have that story about your parents giving away your collection.
Well, yeah. I mean, it wasn't just those Tsum Tsums I mentioned. There were so many other retro toys and cards that I had that I really wish I still had today, even if it was like in a box somewhere. Like, it's the nostalgia, it's the meaning behind it, it's a memory to my childhood and probably a lot of people's childhood. So I totally have that regret of my parents giving it away.
Yeah, and I think a lot of kids feel that way, like kids our age, and this is my theory. I think that's why Pokemon is coming back. I think that's why Hello Kitty is coming back, because we had these collections when we were kids and then we don't have them anymore. But now that we've come into, you know, we have access to money and our own free will and whatnot, we can get those things again.
Totally.
This was Tammy Mack
and Lorna Chili. So whatever you decide to do,
you can collect them all,
you can paint them all,
you can sell them all.
The choice is yours.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Teresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.